Namaste and welcome to the Nirvega Vidya channel. In this video, we shall look at chapter 2 of the Bhagavad-Gita, which is Sankhya Yoga. Now, the first topic we will be looking at is Atma Swarupa. Now, Krishna begins his instruction to Arjuna from the 11th shloka of the second chapter. And this is why most of the commentaries that we find, the classical commentaries, Adi Shankara's commentary, for example, begins from shloka 11, from the point where Krishna begins his instruction. He does not write any commentary on the entire first chapter, nor does he write anything about the first few shlokas of the second chapter as well. He begins his commentary from the point where Krishna begins his instruction, which is from shloka number 11. Now, this is not the first time where Krishna speaks in the Bhagavad Gita, though. He starts his speech from, I think, shloka 2 or 3, where he starts by saying Kutastva Kashmalamidam and all that. He basically just scolds and chides Arjuna for behaving in an unbecoming manner. He says, Anari Jushtam Asvargyam Akirtikaram Arjuna. This is not action. You crying and cribbing like this, and saying that you won't fight in a war is not action that befits you. It is not something which becomes you. So don't do it. He says, Kshudram Hridaya Daurbalyam Taktvottishta Parantapa. Cast off this weak-heartedness and rise up for battle. He says all that. But it is actually from the shloka 11 that he begins his spiritual instruction. And that is why the commentaries usually begin from that point. And what does he first instruct Arjuna in? He begins his instruction by an exposition on the nature of the self. And he does this to bring Arjuna out of the delusion that he's in. Now, a question might be asked at this point. Usually, spiritual knowledge such as this, adhyatmic knowledge about the self, Atma Jnana, is given to those people who seek it. It is given to those pupils. A Shishya, when he approaches a guru and requests to be instructed in Atma Jnana, he receives Atma Jnana. That is how we find instances in the Upanishads. People approach a guru, ask for Atma Jnana, and then receive it. Now, Arjuna in this position has not asked Krishna to instruct him about the self at all. He only says, I won't fight the war. So why is it that Krishna deems it necessary and fit to instruct Arjuna in Atma Jnana? So that could be a question that some of us have. Now, Adi Shankara tackles this question and gives an answer to it in his commentary. He says, the main problem with Arjuna, that Arjuna is going through in this point in time, is that he is overcome by Ahankara and Mamakara. He has an erroneous idea of the self. He thinks there are two main things that, two problematic notions that he has. One is that he is going to be killing people who are his people. They are his people, Mamakara. They are mine. He thinks that he is going to be killing them. And he thinks he is going to be killing them, Ahankara, that I am going to be doing it. So that is the twofold problem that he faces, Ahankara and Mamakara. I am going to be killing them, and I am going to be killing them who are my people. So that is the issue that he faces. So to come out of this issue, he needs to be instructed, he needs to be taught that this notion is erroneous, that you think that the self is going to be killing. That is not true. And if you think that the self is going to be killed when you kill all of them, that is also not true. You are only going to be killing the bodies, which are anyways going to perish. So there is nothing to grieve about in this situation at all. So that is what Krishna aims at making Arjuna realize. And Adi Shankara says this is why it is necessary when a person is overcome by Ahankara and Mamakara, the only solution can be Atma Jnana, which is what Adi Shankara says. And that is why Krishna begins his instruction by an exposition on Atma Swarupa, the true nature of the self. Some of the important points about Atma Swarupa are, there are various famous shlokas which I've mentioned which shloka I'm referring to. You can go through them. I'm not going to be providing the original Samskrita. I'm just condensing the message that they provide and mentioning it here. The self is eternal. There was never a time when it did not exist, nor will there be such a time where it ceases to exist. It is neither the agent nor the recipient of any action. So this is specifically meant for Arjuna because he thinks, I am going to be killing them. If you think the self is going to be killing them, you're wrong, because the self is never the agent of any action. All actions take place in the realm of Prakriti. The Buddhi does it, the Manas does it, the The body does it, which is all under Prakriti, which is all regulated by rigid laws. There is nothing one can do about them. The self is Purusha, which does not partake in any of these actions. It only witnesses them. So therefore, do not think that it is the agent of action. Do not think that you, the self, is going to be killing anybody. That is not true. And don't think that the whatever is going to be killed is the self of these people. It is only the bodies that are going to be destroyed in this battle, and there is nothing to grieve about that, because those were going to be destroyed anyways. A body, once it is born, death is inevitable. So the self is not going to be the recipient of any action. It is completely free of all action. So that is another thing which Krishna says. It is birthless, deathless, eternal, everlasting, and does not die with the body. The famous shloka, Najayate mriyate va kadachit nayam bhutva bhavita va na bhuya. We also find this in the Kathopanishad, and it's a famous shloka, Ajo nitya shashvatoyam puranaha nahanyate hanyamane sharire, which it does not die even when the body dies. And Krishna gives a beautiful analogy. He says, just as a man casts off his old clothes and puts on new ones, the self casts off worn out bodies and takes new ones. He says, this just as, a man can wear different clothes, but the man is the same. There is no change in the man. The clothes are just outer coverings, which can be thrown away at any point in time. Similarly, the self is the reality, and the body which envelops it, the mind which envelops it, they are all things which can be thrown away. They are not fundamental to the self. The self has its own independent existence, just as a person has his independent existence apart from the clothes that he adorns, that he wears. So that is a beautiful analogy that Krishna gives to show that the self is different from the body. The bodies can change, keep changing. The self persists throughout all these changes. It cannot be cut by weapons, burned by fire, wet by water, or dried by air. Again, a very famous shloka, Nainam chindanti shastrani, Nainam dhati pavakaha, na chainam kledayantyapah, na shoshayati marutaha. It is all pervasive, stable, and immovable. It is unmanifest, unthinkable, achintyam, and immutable. It does not undergo any change. So these are some of the key points that Krishna touches upon. I've mentioned the shloka numbers everywhere, so please do refer to them if you wish to know more about them. Krishna's intention is to let Arjuna realize that since the self is eternal and neither kills nor dies, he should not grieve. That there is no reason to grieve, because the self is eternal. He is not going to be killing the self of anybody, nor is his self going to be killing anybody. So there is no reason to grieve. That is the point which Krishna tries to make sure. However, Krishna also says that even if Arjuna erroneously thinks of the self as identical with the body, he still ought not to grieve. Krishna here takes an interesting approach. He argues from the point of view of the layman also. He says, okay, let's take it for granted that the self is identical with the body. Let's say that the self dies whenever the body dies, and it is reborn whenever the body is reborn. Let's say that is the real nature of the self. Let's assume that to be the case. He says, even if that is the case, you should not grieve. There is no reason to grieve, because since death and rebirth are unavoidable circumstances, one ought not to grieve or rejoice about them. He says, when a thing is born, its death is inevitable. And when a person dies, his rebirth is inevitable. There is nothing that man can do in this natural course of events. There is nothing that one can do to prevent them, to catalyze them, nothing. When a thing has to die, it will die. When a thing has to be born, it will be born. So there is nothing to grieve about these things or rejoice when a person is born, for that matter. These are natural phenomena. There is nothing to rejoice or grieve about them. This is very interesting. We might all have seen this flow chart about problems and whether or not we should worry about them. Is there a problem? Yes, no. If no, then why worry? If yes, does it have a solution? Yes, no. If it has a solution, why worry about it? It has a solution. If no, it does not have a solution, well, it does not have a solution. So what is the point of worrying about it? So it is to show that no matter what your circumstances are, it is not justified. Worrying is not a justified reaction. So similarly, Krishna here says that no matter what your opinion of the self is, to grieve about killing these people is not something that is becoming. It is not something that befits you. It is not something an intelligent man would do. So that is the idea that Krishna tries to convey here, and that this is about Atma Swarupa. Now the second topic we'll see, again a very popular topic from the second chapter, is Sthita Prajna. Shlokas 55 to 58 speak about Sthita Prajna Lakshana, the characteristics of a man of stable wisdom. Sthita Prajna means a man who has an established wisdom. So Krishna gives the characteristics of such a man because Arjuna asks him. In Shloka 54, we find Arjuna asking Krishna, Sthita Prajnasya ka bhasha, how does he speak, how does he function and all that. Arjuna asks Krishna to tell him about how a Sthita Prajna functions. So Krishna, after imparting the knowledge of the self to Arjuna, enjoins him to cultivate equanimity and be established in yoga. The famous definitions of yoga come in this part where he says, Yogastha kuru karmani sangam tyaktva dhananjaya siddhya siddhyo samobhutva samatvam yoga uchyate. He says, be equanimous, be steady in the face of both adversities and pleasurable circumstances. Be steady, don't be overjoyed, don't be depressed either. Be stable, be a man of stable wisdom. So Krishna tries to convey that message, and at this point Arjuna asks him, okay, you're telling me to be a man of stable wisdom, you tell me how does a man of stable wisdom act so that I can understand what you're meaning. So that is why he asks, tell me about Asthita Prajna. So the description of a Sthita Prajna given by Krishna is as follows. He gives up all the desires of the heart and is content with the self. He is neither averse to sufferings nor does he cling on to pleasures. He is free from attachments, fear and anger. Bitaraga bhaya krodha. He clings to nothing good or bad that happens to him. He's perfectly unattached. Anabhisneha. Just as a tortoise withdraws its limbs, he withdraws his senses from the sense objects. This is a very, again, popular shloka. Yada samharate chayam kurmongani va sarpashaha indriyani indriyarthebhya tasya prajna pratishtita. It means just as a tortoise withdraws all its 4 limbs as well as its head inside its shell, so 5 limbs going in, including its head. A Sthita Prajna is a man who withdraws his senses from the sense objects. By senses, it does not merely mean the physical sense organs, the eyes, the ears, and all that. But when he says that one withdraws from the sense objects, it is a mental withdrawal. What is referred to is pratyahara, not merely physical restraint, which Krishna will be referring to in a later shloka. He says a person who simply does that, who simply physically controls himself from interacting with the sense organs, sense objects, but mentally keeps on reveling in them, is a hypocrite. That is not the goal of yoga. That is not something that he asks Arjuna to do. But that will be covered in a later shloka. So anyways, so this is how Krishna describes a Sthita Prajna, a man of established wisdom. Krishna's emphasis, he emphasizes on perfect mastery over the mind and sense organs as the characteristics of a Sthita Prajna. So that is a gist of the Sthita Prajna portion. In Shloka 62 and 63, Krishna explains the process which leads to the destruction of a man who has no control over his mind. Again, extremely popular shlokas, and also important to remember the sequence that Krishna speaks of here. What happens first? Repeatedly thinking about objects of the senses. That is the first stage. When one keeps on thinking about them, he gets attached to them. This attachment leads to desire, where he craves these objects. Now, when these desires are unfulfilled, not every time does our desires get fulfilled. So when they are unfulfilled, so that is when we feel anger. We are angry about the fact that they are not fulfilled. This anger gives rise to delusion. Delusion results in the loss of memory, where we forget, the knowledge that we've previously acquired. Adi Shankara interprets this loss of memory as forgetting what the Shastras say about being unattached, being stable, and all those things. We forget these things. So this loss of memory takes place. When loss of memory happens, the next stage is the ruination of the intellect. The intellect does not know what is good and what is bad. It loses its power of discrimination. When the intellect is ruined, the man is destroyed completely. Buddhinashat pranashyati. When this happens, complete ruination takes place. That is the sequence that Krishna gives, which is again a very important part of the second chapter. Now, the final topic we'll be seeing in second chapter is Sankhya Yoga. Now, Sankhya Yoga, as we've seen, is the very name of the chapter. But what does Krishna mean by Sankhya Yoga? Sankhya and Yoga are considered to be the two spiritual disciplines by Krishna. We'll be finding this in the third shloka of the third chapter, Karma Yoga chapter, where he says there are two paths which people take in when it comes to spirituality. They either follow the path of Sankhya, which is the path of Jnana Yoga basically, or they follow the path of Yoga, which is the path of action, which includes all Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Raj Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, everything, Hatha Yoga, all of that. So he says Sankhya refers to the metaphysical understanding, whereas Yoga refers to all the practices that are done to realize this knowledge. Sankhya Yoga is the knowledge which Krishna initially imparted to Arjuna, where he spoke about the reality of the self. When he spoke about the eternality of the self, when he spoke about the characteristics of the self, that was Sankhya Yoga. That was Sankhya. Yoga is when Krishna started instructing Arjuna about what he has to do at this point. With this knowledge, what is that you need? What is it that you need to do? With this knowledge, be equanimous. So that is yoga. That is the yoga aspect of it. To instruct him about what he has to practically do in life. And so yoga refers to all the practices that are done to realize this knowledge. Sankhya and yoga are sometimes seen as science and technology. Sankhya lays down the science of the self, and yoga provides the technology to realize that science, to harness that knowledge. Sankhya refers to the path of jnana, and yoga refers to the path of karma, dhyana, bhakti, everything. So this is a broad classification that Krishna provides, where instead of the usual 4 streams of yoga, he makes them 2, and where yoga acts as a umbrella term to cover all karma yoga, bhakti yoga, Raj Yoga, and everything, and Sankhya refers to Jnana Yoga in particular. Since the second chapter chiefly deals with the nature of reality and the behavior of a man established in that reality, it is called Sankhya Yoga. So, so we come to the end of this video where we've, done a quick survey and a quick study of the second chapter, which is Sankhya Yoga. In our next video, we'll be looking at the third chapter, which is Karma Yoga, and the important points of that chapter. So with that, we come to the end of this video. Thank you very much.